So this is video 4.4b as we continue on with our last example, or our second to the last example, example number 3 here, with dealing with coin problems. Now, in the last video we had mentioned multiplying everything by -5 in order to get the numbers in front of n the same and opposite sign so we could cancel. So we end up with -5n plus -5d equals -110, and we don't do anything to the bottom here. So now when we add those, we get 0. When we add those, we get 5d, and when we add those, we get 60. Divide by 5, divide by 5, and we get d equals 12. Alright, so one of the key things when you're dealing with quantities is we started out with a negative here and we added a 170, and we have a -5 here and we add 10, and sometimes when you make some mistakes, sometimes you end up with a negative answer. When you're talking about a quantity, you will never end up with a negative answer. You can never have -5 marbles. Okay? You can't have less than 0. So when you're looking at your answer and you get a negative, know that you made a mistake somewhere because you have to have a positive number. Alright, so 12 is the number of dimes. So we're going to put a 12 there. So how many nickels do I have in order to get 22? I need to have 10 nickels to have 22. 10 plus 12. And make sure you don't just give me an answer of 10 and 12. I need to know 10 what? So you're going to have to say 10 nickels, 12 dimes, so I know what in the world you're talking about here. Okay, so one more example, and we will be done with this lesson. So example 4 says we have a 20% alcohol solution and a 50% alcohol solution. One of the things that you need to understand is that if you have a 20% alcohol solution, 20% of the solution is alcohol, and 80%, the other part of the 100%, which would be the total, would be water in this case. And if you have a 50% alcohol solution, then the other 50% has to be water. So when we mix those two solutions together, we get 12 gallons of a 30% solution. So I like this picture from other textbooks I've used, just helps me to see what's going on. So we've got a quantity, or a bucket, that's turned upside down there and one there, and here's our main filling bucket there. Alright, so we're putting a quantity in there, and we're putting a quantity in there. Okay, so this quantity on the right is our 20%. And this quantity on the left, the quantity on the right is our 50%. So how much of that 20% are we putting in? We have no idea. But we know when we're done, we're going to get 12 gallons, and this is going to be 30%. Okay? And this amount here that we're putting together will always be between this one and this one. Okay? It can't be more because this one is diluting it, and this one is making this stronger. So it's going to be somewhere between there. And we know that when we add the amount out of here plus the amount out of here, we get 12 gallons. So let's use x as the amount here and y as the amount there. So if we take x plus y, the number of gallons here and the number of gallons there, add them up, we're going to get 12. Okay, that's what we're getting total. This is very much like the coin problem, but instead of nickels and dimes, we're using percentages. So if we take 20% of our x and 50% of our y, we're going to get a 30% of 12, or 30% 12. Okay, so again, x is a quantity, y is a quantity, and 12 is a quantity, and then the rest are percentage. So if I take 20% of that plus 50% of that, I'm going to get 30% of a solution, and I'm going to have 12 gallons. So let's change our percentages to decimals. and I get that. All right, so let's go ahead and multiply those before we do anything else. 0.3 times 12 would be 3.6. And let's get rid of the decimals. So we're going to move the decimal over 1 for each one of these, and that'll just get rid of them. Or actually what I did is we have to move these over 1 to get rid of them, so I multiply the entire thing by a number with 1 0. And so that times that, and that give me my 36. So here are my equations. I'll box them in white. There's one equation, and here is my other equation. So let's put those together. Okay, so those are the ones I'm going to solve. So I'm going to use substitution here, because this is a pretty easy one. So I'm going to take that x plus y equals 12, and I'm going to subtract y from both sides, giving me an x equals 12 minus y. So I just changed that to 12, x equals 12 minus y. It's still the same equation, it's just rearranged. So now, in the second equation, wherever I see an x, I'm going to put 12 minus y in its place. Alright, so let's move a bunch of this stuff out of the way here. And I guess I don't need this anymore. Alright, now let's get this up here. So I'm going to rewrite this as 2 times 12 minus y. Don't forget the 5y. Distribute. Add like terms. Get rid of my 24. Divide by 3. So y equals 4. Alright, so what does that tell me? That tells me that clear back at the beginning, in fact let's go clear back to the beginning here and bring my buckets back down. We said y equals 4. Well, we said that this was y and this was x. So we need 4 gallons of our 50% solution, and that means we're trying to get 12 gallons. That means I need 8 gallons of my 20% solution, so that when I add these up, I get 12 gallons. Okay, so that's what I was looking at. How much of each solution do I have to add in order to get 12 gallons of a 30% solution? Okay, so that is it as far as the lecture part of this goes. Now let's look at and see what you've got to expect as far as your homework assignments go. So let's look at the problem set as I'm deleting all of this. Number problems, the first 8 are number problems. Let's look at number 8 real quick. The difference of 2 positive numbers is 8. So if I take 2 numbers and subtract them, I get 8. So x minus y is 8. Okay. The larger number, which this one's going to be the larger, because if this were the larger, okay, so let's just say for the sake, let's just put a couple numbers in here. Okay, which one's larger? The first one. If I made the second one larger, I get a negative 8. I get a negative answer. Okay, and it said that the difference between 2 positive numbers is negative 8. So is positive 8. So I need to make sure my first number is the larger one. So sometimes what people will do is, instead of saying x minus y, they will write it as L minus S, meaning larger minus the smaller equals 8. Okay. So in fact, let's just do that just to make sure that we don't confuse which number is which. So, larger minus the smaller is 8. What else does it say? The larger number is twice the smaller decreased by 7. So the larger number is twice the smaller decreased by 7. Okay, so there are your two equations there. And now you use either substitution or elimination to find the larger number and the smaller number. Okay, so let's look at the interest problems, 9 through 12. These look like they're very, very similar to the one I did in the example, I think the second example, so I'm not going to go over those. 13 through 16, pretty much the same thing. They give you, I mean, if you look at 16, we've got a guy that has 31 dimes and nickels. So his number of dimes plus his nickels is 31. The value is $2.40. So the value of his dimes are 10 times the number he has. The nickels are 5 times the number he has equals 240. So notice what I did. It says $2.40, 2.4. If I just make that 240, then I don't have to worry about these decimals at all. So that's what I would suggest doing. Whenever they give you an amount totaling, just take the decimal off, and then you can just put 5 cents and 10 cents or 25 cents for quarters or whatever. And then you've got your two equations there. So that's it for as far as the coin problems. Now the mixture problems, they gave you a table. I didn't do one with a table when I gave you the example just because I'm not used to necessarily using a table. But the table is helpful. So if you look at number 18, it says how many liters of 10% alcohol, which means 90% is water, and a 5% alcohol solution must be mixed to obtain 40 liters. So it's pretty much just what we've done before. You know, I've got my handy dandy little buckets here, and this is my 10% and this is my 5%, and it's asking us how much of this and how much of this are going to be added into this barrel here to give me an 8% and 40 liters. So it's the exact same equation as I did in the example. Okay, so not any difference there. And then they give you some miscellaneous problems, which are just a bunch of different things, which you're going to have to stretch your brain a little bit. Like 24, you've got a rope and it's being cut into two pieces. So if you take the length of one rope piece and the other piece, you're going to get 22 inches, and they give you enough information to put those together. So hopefully you won't have too much trouble with these problems in 4.4. So that is it.